What happens when a man known for saying everything with his eyes decides to stop speaking altogether and lets a single, final stare do the damage? The studio lights were already hot, but in that moment, the air inside the set of The View felt like it was about to combust. Millions were watching. The audience sat forward in their seats. And across the table, two worlds collided: Hollywood restraint versus daytime television confrontation. Before we go any further, if you love intense, cinematic celebrity moments like this, subscribe to Stage View right now. Hit like, drop a comment, and stay with us, because what you're about to witness isn't just an interview. It's a slow-burning showdown. He had been calm when he walked in, almost eerily so. Daniel Craig entered the studio with the quiet confidence of someone who had survived explosions, interrogations, and betrayals on screen, and learned long ago that the most dangerous moments are the quiet ones. His jaw was set, his posture relaxed but alert. Not stiff, not defensive, just controlled. Across from him sat Sunny Hostin, poised, prepared, eyes sharp with the familiar mix of curiosity and challenge. She had done this thousands of times. Politicians, actors, public figures at their most vulnerable. This was her arena. The applause faded. The smiles were exchanged. Polite, professional, almost warm. Almost. The first few minutes moved smoothly enough. Film talk, legacy questions, reflections on endings and reinvention. Daniel answered with short sentences, thoughtful pauses. He wasn't there to perform. He never was. He spoke like a man closing a chapter, not selling one. Sunny nodded, listening, waiting. And then she leaned forward. Her tone shifted, not aggressive, not yet, but precise. Surgical. "So Daniel," she said, fingers lightly touching her cue cards, "you've spoken before about responsibility, about influence. Do you think actors, especially ones with your platform, have an obligation to be more vocal about social and political issues?" The audience hummed softly. A murmur. This wasn't new territory for the show, but it was new ground for him. Daniel Craig didn't do soapboxes. He didn't tweet manifestos. He didn't trade silence for applause. He inhaled slowly, a pause long enough to feel intentional. "I think," he said carefully, "that people should speak when they have something meaningful to say, and stay quiet when they don't." A safe answer. Measured. Neutral. Sunny smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "But silence," she replied, "can also be a statement, can it?" The camera cut to Daniel. For the first time, his expression changed. Not anger, not discomfort, but something colder. Something more distant, like a door gently closing. "I don't believe silence owes anyone an explanation," he said. The audience reacted. A ripple of claps. A few sharp intakes of breath. Sunny didn't blink. "But when fans look up to you," she continued, voice steady, "when they see you as a symbol, don't you think choosing not to speak can be just as powerful as choosing to speak?" There it was. Not an accusation. Not a question. A challenge. Daniel shifted in his chair. Barely noticeable. But the tension tightened. His hands clasped together. His thumb pressed into his knuckle. A familiar tell to those who knew his interviews well. "I'm an actor," he said. "Not a spokesperson." The words landed heavier than they should have. Because they weren't just words, they were a line. Sunny tilted her head. "But you've played heroes," she said. "Icons. Men who stand up." The studio went quiet. Daniel looked at her then. Really looked at her. And something unspoken passed between them. A recognition that this conversation had stepped beyond its script. "I've played characters," he said. "They're not me." A beat. Sunny smiled again. Sharper this time. "Some would argue," she said, "that choosing when to disengage is a privilege." The audience audibly reacted. A low echoed from somewhere in the back. One of the co-hosts shifted in her seat. Another glanced toward the producers. Daniel didn't respond immediately. He stared at the table. The microphones. The reflection of the lights on the glossy surface. When he finally looked up, his eyes weren't angry. They were calm. Too calm. "I don't disengage," he said quietly. "I live my life privately." Sunny met his gaze. "And when people are hurting," she pressed. "When voices need amplification?" Another pause. Longer this time. Daniel's jaw tightened. "I don't believe," he said slowly, "that my opinion carries more moral weight because of my job." The words were restrained, but the tension underneath them was not. Sunny leaned back slightly, crossing her arms, not defensively, but decisively. "So you don't see your silence as impactful?" That's when it happened. Daniel Craig stopped answering. He didn't look away. He didn't sigh. He didn't interrupt. He simply lifted his eyes and locked them onto Sunny Hostin's, and held them there. No smile. No frown. No warmth. Just a stare. A long one. The kind that doesn't ask for permission. The kind that doesn't soften. The kind that says more than dialogue ever could. The studio froze. The cameras lingered, unsure whether to cut away. Sunny's expression flickered, just for a fraction of a second. Surprise? Annoyance? Recognition? The audience stopped breathing. Seconds passed. 5. 10. Daniel didn't blink. Sunny shifted in her chair. Daniel, she prompted. Nothing. The stare continued. It wasn't hostile. It wasn't theatrical. It was final. And in that silence, everything changed. The tension wasn't loud. It was suffocating. The kind that crawls up your spine. The kind that makes producers whisper frantically behind the cameras. Finally, Daniel broke eye contact. He leaned back, exhaled once. I think, he said evenly, we've covered this. The words were polite. The message was not. The audience erupted, some clapping, some stunned silence, some nervous laughter. Sunny nodded slowly, lips pressed together, recalibrating in real time. All right, she said. Let's move on. But nothing moved on, because the moment had already escaped the studio. That stare, cold, controlled, unmistakable, had said everything Daniel Craig refused to put into words. And everyone in that room knew it. As the cameras cut to commercial, whispers filled the space. Phones were already out. Producers exchanged looks that said this wasn't just another segment. This was about to become something else entirely. And when we come back, the real fallout begins, because silence, when wielded like a weapon, echoes far louder than sound. The red light blinked off, but the silence didn't. During the commercial break, the studio breathed again, just barely. Crew members shifted their weight. A producer leaned in from off-camera, murmuring something urgent, clipped, controlled. The audience buzzed in low waves, like a storm being held back by glass walls. Daniel Craig sat exactly where he was, shoulders loose, hands folded in his lap. He hadn't checked his phone, hadn't reached for water. He stared straight ahead, not at anyone in particular, as if the moment he'd just created was still unfolding somewhere only he could see. Sunny Hostin adjusted the papers in front of her, then adjusted them again. She took a measured sip from her mug. To anyone watching casually, she looked composed. Professional. But those close enough could see it. The tension in her jaw, the way her eyes flicked briefly toward the producers, then back to Daniel. That stare hadn't been loud. That was the problem. Loud moments fade. Quiet ones linger. One of the co-hosts leaned toward Sunny and whispered, "Are you okay?" Sunny nodded once. A tight nod. "I'm fine," she said under her breath. "We're fine." But fine wasn't the word. Across the table, Daniel shifted for the first time, rolling his shoulders slightly, like a man loosening up after holding a weight too long. When he finally spoke, it wasn't to Sunny, and it wasn't for the microphones. "Can we just keep it about the film?" he asked softly, toward the producer hovering near the camera. The producer hesitated, then nodded. "We'll steer it," she said. The countdown began. 5, 4, 3. Sunny inhaled deeply, setting her face into its on-air calm just as the red light blinked back on. "And we're back," she said smoothly, voice warm, practiced. "Daniel, let's talk about legacy." Legacy. The word hung there, heavy with irony. Daniel turned toward her, the polite half-smile returning, but something had shifted. Not broken, hardened, like steel cooled too quickly. "Legacy's a strange thing," he replied. "You don't really get to decide it." The audience nodded along. A safe answer. A bridge. Sunny smiled, sensing the opening. "But you do influence it," she said. "Whether you want to or not." Daniel's eyes flicked up, not sharply this time, but deliberately. "I influence my work," he said. "That's where it ends for me." A murmur rolled through the audience. Some approval. Some discomfort. Sunny leaned in again, slower now, careful. "Do you worry," she asked, "that by disengaging from conversations happening right now, you risk being remembered as distant? As someone who chose comfort over courage?" There it was again. Different words. Same blade. Daniel didn't answer immediately. He turned his gaze away from Sunny and toward the audience. Toward the rows of faces, young, old, attentive, restless. People who had watched him save fictional worlds. People who had projected meaning onto his silence. When he spoke, his voice was low, steady. I've spent my life playing men who solve problems with violence, he said. Men who believe certainty makes them right. I don't want to become one of them in real life. The room stilled. That, he continued, is why I'm careful. Sunny's expression softened, but only slightly. But careful for whom? She asked. You or everyone else? Daniel turned back to her. For myself, he said, because I'm not interested in performing morality. That word, performing, hit a nerve. Sunny straightened. Is speaking out always a performance? She asked. Daniel's lips pressed together. A flicker of something crossed his face, fatigue maybe, or frustration he'd been holding back too long. No, he said, but being expected to is. The audience reacted more audibly this time. Applause broke out, scattered but growing. A few people stood. Others remained seated, arms crossed, conflicted. Sunny let the applause crest, then gently raised a hand. I hear you, she said. I really do. But for people who don't have platforms, who don't have the luxury of privacy, silence from powerful voices can feel like abandonment. Daniel listened, truly listened. His head tilted slightly, eyes steady. I don't dismiss that feeling, he said. But I also don't accept the premise that my voice is required for others to matter. A beat. I don't want to replace anyone's voice, he added. I want them to be heard without me. The clapping returned, louder now, mixed with a few sharp exhalations. The room was split, and everyone could feel it. Sunny nodded slowly, choosing her next words with care. So this silence you choose, it's intentional? Daniel met her gaze again. Not cold this time. Clear. Yes, he said. It is. Another pause. And final. That question landed differently. Daniel considered it. Then quietly. For me? Yes. Something passed across Sunny's face. Acceptance, maybe. Or the realization that this wasn't a wall she could push through. All right, she said. I respect your honesty. The tension didn't vanish, but it shifted, like a storm changing direction. They moved on. Film clips rolled. Lighter questions followed. Laughter even broke out once or twice. But the earlier moment lingered like smoke after a fire, visible, inescapable. When the show wrapped and the applause swelled, Daniel stood, shook hands, thanked the hosts. Professional. Polite. Sunny offered a firm smile. Thank you for being here, she said. Thank you for having me, Daniel replied. Their eyes met one last time. This time there was no stare. Just distance. Backstage, phones buzzed relentlessly. Assistants whispered headlines already forming. Social media clips were circulating before Daniel reached his car. Did you see that look? He shut her down without saying a word. That was icy. That was necessary. That was disrespectful. That was powerful. By the time Daniel slid into the back seat, his publicist was already scrolling. It's blowing up, she said. Daniel leaned back, closed his eyes. I figured, he said. What do you want to do? She asked. Statement? Clarification. He opened his eyes, staring out the window as the city blurred past. No, he said. Let it sit. The car pulled away, carrying him back into privacy. Behind him, the studio lights dimmed. But the moment he left behind was just beginning to burn. And by morning, that silence, so deliberate, so unyielding, would be louder than anything either of them had said on air. By morning, the silence had metastasized. Clips from The View looped endlessly across screens, slowed down, zoomed in, dissected frame by frame. The stare, the pause, the refusal to fill space. Commentators spoke over it, under it, around it. None of them could quite touch it. Daniel Craig woke to a phone vibrating itself, numb on the nightstand. He didn't reach for it right away. He lay there, staring at the ceiling, listening to the distant hum of traffic and the closer thud of his own pulse. He knew this feeling. Not nerves, aftermath. When he finally checked the screen, there were dozens of messages. Publicist. Agent. Friends. One from his wife that simply read, You okay? He typed back 2 words. I'm fine. He wasn't sure if that was true. Across town, Sunny Hostin stood in front of her bathroom mirror, the morning light unkind and honest. The clip was playing on her phone, propped against the sink. She watched herself lean in. Watched herself ask the question. Watched the moment where the air changed. She paused the video right before the stare. Exhaled. Then she hit play. The silence still landed like a slap. Sunny set the phone down and closed her eyes. She'd handled backlash before. This wasn't her first storm. But this one felt different. Not because she thought she'd crossed a line, but because the line itself was suddenly all anyone wanted to talk about. Her phone buzzed. Producer. Morning, Sunny said, steady. Are you seeing this? The producer asked. I'm seeing everything. A beat. You didn't do anything wrong, the producer said quickly. But the internet's split. Sunny gave a dry laugh. It always is. What no one could agree on was who had won. Some said Daniel Craig had dismantled the conversation without raising his voice. That he'd exposed the pressure celebrities faced to perform conscience on demand. Others said he'd used silence as a shield, a privilege masquerading as principle. And then there were those who said the stare itself was the real message. Cold. Calculated. Devastating. Pundits debated it like a Rorschach test. Everyone saw what they wanted. By noon, the phrase final cold stare was trending. Daniel's publicist sat across from him in a quiet hotel suite, laptop open, jaw tight. They're calling it iconic, she said. Also arrogant. Also courageous. Also cowardly. Daniel nodded once. Sounds about right. We can release a statement, she offered. Clarify intent. Take control of the narrative. He considered that. The urge to explain flickered, human, reflexive. But it passed. No, he said. Anything I say now turns it into a performance. She studied him. You're okay with people misunderstanding you? Daniel looked out the window. I'm not okay with pretending I can control that. A pause. Sunny's team reached out, she added carefully. They're not hostile. Just checking temperature. He turned back to her. Anne, they want to know if you felt ambushed. Daniel shook his head. No. Then what? He thought about it. The table. The lights. The question that kept coming back in different clothes. I felt expected, he said. And I don't respond well to expectations dressed as morality. His publicist closed the laptop slowly. All right. Meanwhile, the show reconvened without him. Sunny sat at the table again, the familiar mug in her hands, the audience buzzing with anticipation. Everyone knew they would address it. The only question was how. She looked into the camera. Yesterday's conversation sparked a lot of reaction, she began. And that's okay. This table exists for hard conversations. The co-hosts nodded. One leaned in. Do you regret the question? She asked. Sunny didn't answer immediately. She chose honesty over speed. No, she said. But I respect the answer, even when the answer is silence. That clip, too, went viral. Some praised her composure. Others accused her of backtracking. A few noticed something else entirely, the way her voice softened when she said respect. By evening, the discourse had sharpened. Think pieces bloomed like weeds. Psychology threads analyzed the stare as dominance behavior. Body language experts froze frames and circled eyes, posture, micro-expressions. One headline read, When Silence Becomes a Statement. Another, The Power and Peril of Celebrity Quiet. Daniel watched none of it. He went for a walk instead, baseball cap pulled low, hands in pockets. Strangers passed him without recognition, and he welcomed it. The world felt smaller out here. Manageable. At a crosswalk, a man about his age glanced over, then did a double take. Hey, the man said. You're. Daniel smiled faintly. I am. The man hesitated. That thing yesterday. I don't know. I thought it was brave. Daniel nodded. Thanks. The light changed. They crossed in opposite directions. Back at the studio, Sunny finished her day, gathered her things, and paused before leaving. She looked at the empty chairs, the table where tension had briefly crystallized into something unforgettable. She wasn't angry. She wasn't wounded. But she was thoughtful. That night, both of them lay awake, separately, staring into different ceilings, replaying the same moment from opposite sides of the table. Neither planned to speak again about it. But the world wasn't done listening. And tomorrow, when the question of intent collided with the hunger for resolution, that silence would be tested one last time, by the very thing Daniel Craig had tried to keep at bay. The demand for a response. The demand came quietly at first. A request here. A mention there. Journalists phrased it politely. Would you like to clarify? While social media was anything but polite. Silence, it turned out, didn't end conversations. It magnetized them. By the third day, the moment had hardened into legend. Clips from The View were no longer just clips. They were symbols. The pause before the stare. The stillness during it. The way the studio seemed to shrink around two people locked in an unspoken standoff. Late-night hosts joked about it. Podcasts argued over it. Universities assigned it in media ethics discussions. Someone even turned the stare into a looping GIF with dramatic music underneath. Daniel Craig saw none of that directly, but he felt it. He sat in a quiet room during a press junket overseas, answering questions about film endings and character arcs, when a reporter finally broke the unspoken rule. "Daniel," she said gently, "do you regret how that interview ended?" The room stilled. His publicist's shoulders tightened. Daniel didn't hesitate. "No," he said. A murmur moved through the room. "Do you regret not answering?" the reporter pressed. Daniel looked straight at her. Not cold. Not warm. Honest. "I answered," he said. "Just not verbally." That quote ricocheted everywhere. For some, it sealed the myth. For others, it confirmed the critique. But for Daniel, it felt like closure. The last word without becoming a speech. Back in New York, Sunny Hostin watched that clip alone in her office. She replayed it once. Then again. She didn't bristle. She smiled. Because she understood something now that hadn't been clear in the heat of the moment. The stare hadn't been about her. It hadn't even been about the question. It had been about refusal. Not refusal to engage, but refusal to perform. The next morning, she addressed it one final time. "Silence," she said on air, "can feel uncomfortable, especially on television. But discomfort isn't always disrespect. Sometimes it's a boundary." The audience listened. Quietly. "That interview," she continued, "reminded me that not every answer is owed, even when the question is fair." There was no applause this time. Just reflection. The media cycle moved on, as it always does. New controversies replaced old ones. But this moment didn't disappear. It settled, lingered, became shorthand. The stare. Months later, a fan asked Daniel Craig at a low-key event, "Do you think people will remember you for that look?" Daniel considered it. "If they do," he said, "I hope they remember why it happened." And maybe that was the aftermath no one expected. Not victory, not defeat, but a recalibration. A reminder that power doesn't always raise its voice. That sometimes the loudest act in a room full of microphones is choosing not to speak at all. Now we want to hear from you. Was Daniel Craig's silence a powerful stand, or an unfair dodge? Did Sunny Hostin push a necessary question, or cross into expectation? Let us know what you saw in that moment. Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more explosive cinematic stories that put you right inside the tension, subscribe to Stage View right now. Like, share, and stay with us, because the next silence might be even louder.